After last week's reflection went live, it didn't end. It followed me into conversation, into real life, real people, and the questions that stayed with me. One of those questions opened something deeper. Because pretense is such a familiar part of our lives, it often goes unnoticed. It can feel normal, even necessary. And yet, pretense is not neutral. It shapes how we speak, how we act, and how we justify what we do. Until something destructive is mistaken for something acceptable. A friend listened and asked something that stopped me in my tracks. The question was, what is the difference between pretense and motive? At first, I didn't think the two belonged together. But as I sat with the question, I realized maybe it wasn't about difference at all, but about how easily one can be used to excuse the other. That question came from my friend Jacqueline, and it arrived while I was sitting with my cousin Desma and her husband Jerry. Jerry offered something honest. He spoke about motive, about wanting to do something simply to make someone he loves happy. And it raised a question for me. What happens when our desire to keep the peace, to make someone happy, leads us to soften or avoid the truth? That's a motive many of us recognize. And this is where motive becomes important, not just as justification, but as something that needs to be examined. Because our motives are really pure. They are shaped by fear, by comfort, by what we believe will keep us safe, liked, or at peace. And sometimes what we call a good motive is actually an attempt to avoid discomfort, conflict, or truth. That is when the deeper question appeared. When we pretend in order to make someone happy, are we actually creating a deeper injustice to what is? But motives need to be examined because they are the seeds of action. There are moments when we feel forced to pretend. Not always because we are threatened, but because honesty feels costly. We pretend we are fine when we are not. We pretend agreement to avoid conflict. We pretend certainty when we are unsure. We pretend competence when we feel inadequate. We pretend loyalty when we are afraid to disappoint. We pretend peace when something in us is unsettled. In each of these moments, someone is being deceived. Sometimes another person, but often ourselves. And when we deceive ourselves, we invite pretense to become a way of living, not just a momentary choice. The motive may be comfort, approval, safety, or control. The desire may feel reasonable, even necessary, but indulgence does not become harmless because it is common. And then there is deliberate pretense, the kind we use to pull the wool over someone's eyes, to mislead, to gain advantage, to avoid consequence. This is not confusion. This is not fear. This is not unknowing. This is intention aligned with desire and pretense chosen as the method. Even here, we deceive ourselves, convincing ourselves that the outcome justifies the means, that no real harm is done, that we will fix it later. But deception does not remain contained. What is introduced into reality does not disappear because it was calculated. This is where trajectory shifts. Not because of cruelty, not because of bad intent, but because reality has been asked to carry something that is not real. And reality always responds. What isn't true has consequences of its own, not as punishment, but as response. Reality responds to what we introduce into it, whether we acknowledge it or not. Earlier that same day, I moved through slow systems, waiting rooms, forms, long lines, delayed answers. Nothing was fast. Nothing could be forced. And I realized something. Pretending efficiency would not heal my body. Pretending patience would not make the system move. The only honest response was steadiness, dealing with things just as they are, recognizing that this too shall pass. That day ended the way days often do, not with answers, but with a sky slowly changing. There was no urgency in it, no justification, no attempt to appear as anything other than what it was becoming. The sky didn't negotiate with light or time. It responded. And in that quiet unfolding, I was reminded truth does not need performance, and reality does not need our agreement. What we introduce into the world matters. What we introduce into our relationships matters. What we introduce into ourselves matters. Because response is already at work, long before we name it. The sky you are seeing here was the same sky under which that conversation unfolded.